Okay, now you can see the slides also. Yes, can you see now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Translation we had discussed in the last class also, but I thought we have a lot of time. That's why we'll again revise this time in today's class, and we'll move forward. Translation, we all know the basics of translation, but now how to write in the examinations and how about the detailed process. Okay. Regarding translation, we all know that translation is the synthesis of proteins. And for the synthesis of proteins means there are certain components required, and they are the amino acids. We know that proteins are the polymers of amino acids, and and we say that protein is coded by our genes. That means genes presenting DNA that produces mRNA, and according to the information from mRNA, by joining one by one amino acids, then only proteins would be synthesized. Regarding the components, amino acids, ribosomes, different type of RNAs, also tRNA and ribosomal RNA. When we say about the central dogma of molecular biology, we say that from DNA gives rise to RNA, and RNA gives rise to protein. This is the central dogma or the central rule of molecular biology. But sometimes RNA themselves are functional or themselves are active, as you can see in the cases of transfer RNA and ribosomal RNA. Transfer RNA and ribosomal RNA, they are not going to give the proteins from them as such, but transfer RNA and ribosomal RNA, they themselves are active during the synthesis of protein. The RNA which gives protein is only the mRNA. That means the central dogma from DNA to RNA to proteins will be applicable only for mRNA and not for the transfer RNA and the ribosomal RNA. Okay. And about the ribosomes, uh, we already know that the eukaryotic and the prokaryotic ribosomes are different, and they are of 70 and 80 S. And these 70 S and 80 S, they also have the subunits. And when you add up, this should not be the total, because this S stands for the Sedberg unit, which is related to the sedimentation coefficient. And both of these units, the larger unit, okay, let's point to prokaryotic. This larger unit and the smaller unit, they again consist of the several proteins and ribosomal RNA. And same in the case of eukaryotic also. Okay. In the protein synthesis, what requirements we have already discussed: amino acids. First of all, there should be amino acids and different type of RNAs, and the protein factory where the protein is synthesized is ribosomes. These are the required ones. How protein would be synthesized is that mRNA will go and sits in the proper place between the two subunits of ribosome, and after doing that, the transfer RNA, as you can see here, brings one by one amino acid attached to this 3' end, and which amino acid to bring is dictated by the codon present in mRNA, according to which anticodon is present in the transfer RNA. Okay, these are the stages of protein synthesis: activation of amino acids. First of all, amino acids have to be activated, because we know that proteins are the polymers of amino acids, but amino acids as such will not be attached to form the proteins. First of all, there should be the activation of amino acids, and this activation means amino acids have to be attached with the 3' region of transfer RNA. They get first of all attached to the 3' end of transfer RNA, and this is known as the activation of amino acids. And during the activation of amino acids, what are required are the amino acids. And we talked about the 20 different standard amino acids, that means which are coded by our gene. And to activate 20 different amino acids, 20 different specific synthetase enzymes are present. That is 20 amino acyl tRNA synthetases are present and tRNAs, and it also requires energy. If you talk about the initiation codon is AUG, and that AUG codes for methionine. And in the case of prokaryotes, that methionine, the first methionine, always comes as formyl methionine, whereas in eukaryotic, it is only the methionine. But in the case of prokaryotic, it is the formyl methionine. And for the initiation, first of all, before protein synthesis, two subunits are separated. Two ribosomal subunits are separated, and they have to be assembled later on. Before the assembly of two ribosomal subunits, there comes the role of initiation factors. This initiation factors 1 and initiation factor 3 would come and bind to the small ribosomal subunit. Then mRNA would come and again assembly will be formed. Okay, similarly we'll go to elongation. And for the elongation also there are elongation factors. It's like in the case of prokaryotes, elongation factor Tu, elongation factor Ts, and elongation factor G. Later on termination and release, and after that folding and post-translational processing. Okay, when we have to describe about the protein synthesis, it is easier to describe it in 3 stages. First one, activation of amino acids. Second stage, uh, protein synthesis in proper protein synthesis, which includes initiation, elongation. Next one is the termination and release. And stage number 3 is folding and post-translational processing, or folding and post-translational modifications. First of all, there should be the activation of amino acids, then protein synthesis proper, and after protein synthesis proper also, this is protein synthesis proper means proper translation process, and there will be post-translational modification or post-translational processing. Okay, just 1 minute, okay. Okay, I'm back. Started running. We're talking about the protein synthesis. First of all, activation of amino acids, protein synthesis proper, and only after that, folding and post-translational processing. Activation of amino acid. Activation of amino acid is actually the attachment of amino acids to this 3' end of transfer RNA, and during this process, energy is also utilized. As you can see here, ATP is attached first. ATP is hydrolyzed. First of all, enzyme AMP amino acid is formed, and AMP is released, and enzyme is also released from that complex, resulting in the attachment of amino acid in this transfer RNA. This is known as amino cell transfer RNA, and this amino cell transfer RNA is known as the activated mRNA. Is it activated mRNA? No. This is the activated amino acid. And in addition to the attachment of amino acid to this 3' end of transfer RNA, this enzyme also has the proofreading activity. That means if there is any improper amino acid attached by some mistake or by some circumstances, then it will proofread it, and it immediately detaches it from the transfer RNA. Okay, protein synthesis proper. We have studied, we have heard the words about polycystinic and monocystinic. That means in prokaryotes, there will be the promoter. Sorry, what is the other one? One was promoter and the operator regions. There will be promoter and operator regions just in front of the gene, but that promoter and operator region would be the same for the related polypeptides. That means from the one regulatory sequences, a number of proteins would be regulated. That means a single mRNA can give more than one polypeptide. This is known as polycystonic in the case of prokaryotes, whereas in the case of eukaryotes, only one polypeptide will be controlled by the promoter and the operator sequences of that particular polypeptide. This is known as the monocysteine. That means one mRNA will give rise to one protein, basically one polypeptide. Okay, initiation. Now we'll explain this with the help of figure because the study itself also we have already seen. Okay, first of all, now we have already studied about the activation of amino acid. After the activation of amino acid, we'll enter into the protein synthesis proper, and that protein synthesis proper would include initiation, elongation, and termination. And in that initiation, first of all, what would happen is two subunits of the ribosome would get separated, and now this initiation factor 3 and initiation factor 1 would bind to the 30th ribosomal subunit. Initiation factor 3 and initiation factor 1 would bind to the 30th ribosomal subunit. We are talking in the case of prokaryotic case. And after it binds to, after initiation factors 3 and 1 bind to this small unit of the ribosome, that is 30th ribosomal subunit, only after that mRNA would come and bind here. Only after that mRNA would come and bind here, and this mRNA in this region it has a consensus sequence known as the Sine Dalgarno sequence, and that would be recognized by the RNA RNA ribosomal RNA present in the ribosomes, which help in proper alignment of this messenger RNA in this region. Okay, factor 1, factor 3 are already bound with this smaller subunit of ribosome, and after that this mRNA has come and bound. After this, sorry, initiation factor 2 along with along with the transfer RNA carrying the initiating amino acid, along with the transfer RNA containing the initiated amino acids would come and bind here. The first amino acid to be incorporated prokaryotes is formyl methionine. That is why, because this initiation factor 2 only recognize formyl methionine, not other methionine. But in case of eukaryotes, this is not formylated, but it is only methionine. Transfer RNA would come in case of eukaryotic case. But we are talking about the prokaryotic case. In prokaryotes, this is the formyl methionine will come and attach, because this initiation factor 2 will recognize only the formyl methionine, not the methionine. Okay. After it comes and binds, only after it comes and bind, now what happens? Initiation factor 1, initiation factor 2, and initiation factor 3 will be released once this 50S ribosome will come and attaches here. These initiation factors now will be released when this subunit, 50S subunit, will come and attach here. Now we can see the three regions in the ribosome: A site, P site, and the E site. A site is the amino acyl binding site, P site is the peptidyl site, E site is the exit site. In this representation itself, you can see this A site and P site that are in the both the subunits, but this E does not extend to the smaller subunit. Okay, this first amino acid, formyl methionine, this will come and attaches to the P site, that is the peptidyl site. But after this, after the first amino acid is bound with this P site, now always the amino acid will come and bind at first in the A site. But the first amino acid that will not come and bind to the A site, but that will directly bind to the P site, that is formyl methionine. Okay, let's have a brief overview to this table. Protein factors required for initiation of translation in bacterial and eukaryotic cell. There are several protein factors. We have been discussing about the prokaryotes, that is the bacterial initiation factor 1, 2, and 3. And in the case of eukaryotic, we name them as EIF 1, 2, 3 like that. This E stands for the eukaryotic initiation factors. One by one we can go yourself, but now here in the case of prokaryotes, so we have 3 initiation factor 1, 2, and 3, but in eukaryotic there are many initiating factors. Okay, we have seen the initiation complex, how the initiation complex was formed in prokaryotic case. That was first the ribosomal subunits will disassemble, and in that smaller ribosomal subunit 30S, initiation factor 1 and 3 would come and bind, and after that mRNA would come, and after mRNA would come and bind. Only after that initiation factor 2 would come along with the formyl methionine uh, attached transfer RNA, that is the activated amino acid, would come and bind. That was that much simple. But in the case of eukaryotic case, the formation of this initiation complex is not that simple as we have seen in prokaryotic case. Now this is the initiation complex formation in the eukaryotic case, and in the eukaryotic case we know that this mRNA is also modified. Now you can see the cap in the 5' region, and there is the tail in 3' region, and several proteins which recognize this cap in the 5' region, that is the eukaryotic elongation factor 4E. This recognizes the cap in the 5' region and gets attached with it, and with this elongation factor 4E, along with is bound the elongation factor 4G, and this is bound with this poly A tail binding region. And this binds to the next side, that means the 3' end of the mRNA, and this is how the complex is initiation complex is formed. And thereafter also the process is more complicated, involving more number of the initiating factors. Now we have said that the Sain-Dalgarno sequence is the sequence which is present in case of prokaryotic mRNA, so that it can align itself properly between the two subunits of the ribosomes. Similar sequence is also present in eukaryotic case, known as the Kozak consensus sequence. Sain-Dalgarno sequence was present in prokaryotes, whereas Kozak consensus sequence is present in eukaryotes. Now, in the case of elongation, 40 amino acids are added per second to the growing carboxylane. During elongation, ribosomes move from 5' to 3' end of mRNA. We have said that protein synthesis also starts from the 5' end towards the 3' end. And near to the 5' end, there is the consensus sequence, Sain-Dalgarno sequence in case of the prokaryotic, and Kozak consensus in case of eukaryotic case. And for the elongation, there are some factors known as the elongation factors. In prokaryotes, elongation factor Tu, elongation factor Ts, and elongation factor G help, whereas in eukaryotes there are large number of elongation factors, and they are written as E and then elongation factors. The initiator elongation, the initiator tRNA occupies the P site. We have already seen the amino acyl tRNA. After that, every amino acid, that is activated amino acid, that is amino acid attached with the tRNA, now they will occupy the A site, and they also utilize the energy. Now we'll see the elongation. First amino acid carrying this, first transfer RNA carrying the initiator amino acid would come and directly bind to this P site, and next amino acid which is bound with the transfer RNA now comes and bind with this A site. And after binding with this A site, now there are two amino acids within this protein factory. Now what will happen? The peptide bond will be found between these two amino acids. Formation of the peptide bond by the enzyme peptidyl transferase. Now the peptide bond will be formed between these two amino acids, and it will be attached with this newer one, and this let's say the older one or the earlier one. This transfer RNA will be free, and this will move to the exit site, and from the exit site it will be released. Now elongation factor. As you can see, what happened? There were two amino acids, one with this and the other with this transfer RNA. What happened? After, with the help of peptidyl transferase, peptide bond was formed between the two amino acids, and in doing that, it is released from this that earlier transfer RNA, and now it becomes a chain with the newer one. And after the third, fourth, fifth, like this, it will be elongated. Now this will be released. Translocation by translocases, then A site is free and ready to accept the incoming transfer in amino acyl transfer RNA. The process will continue to the termination of codon is reached. Now here we are talking about the several elongation factors. Elongation factor G is known as translocase. That means elongation factor G will help in the movement of these ribosomes. That means shifting of this ribosome one codon towards the 3' end from the 5' end. In doing so, this will be automatically shifted to here, and this will be shifted to here, and this A site will be empty. Okay, let's see some more about the formation of peptide bond. This formation of peptide bond is by peptidyl transferase, and this peptidyl transferase is not the protein. This is the enzyme, but this is not the protein. The enzyme peptidyl transferase catalyzes the formation of peptide bond, and this activity is on the ribosome. If you see in prokaryotic case, 30S ribosome of larger subunit. Let's say this is the larger subunit, and in the case of eukaryotic also, this is 28S rRNA of larger subunit. Those ribosomal RNA present act as an enzyme, and they are known as the ribozyme. As the peptide bond formation occurs, ribozymes move to a next codon and mRNA towards 3' region. This process is called translocation, and this translocation is helped by elongation factor G, and this elongation factor G is also known as translocase. Now termination. One of the 3 codons UAA, UAG, UGA act as stop signals and terminate the growing polypeptide. As the terminator codon occupies the A site, the release factors would come and bind. That's it. Okay, we'll help directly with the picture because last time also we have already seen. Now, sorry. When this A site encounters the stop codon, now what will come here and bind are the release factors, because corresponding to this we don't have the transfer RNA or the activated amino acid. We don't have the corresponding transfer RNA or the activated amino acid corresponding to this. And what would come and bind with this stop signal is the releasing factors. Releasing factors would come and bind. Okay. Termination codon appears on the A site, no corresponding transfer RNA for termination codon. Now, once the release factor comes and bind, polypeptide transfer RNA link is hydrolyzed. Once this releasing factor will come and bind here, it will hydrolyze the link between this transfer RNA and the polypeptide. That means now this is now the protein is ready. This polypeptide is ready, and it also caused the dissociation of this transfer RNA from this complex. Dissociation of the complexes. This is done by the done by the release factors. There are different release factors, and when this stop signals is encountered by the A site, now instead of the activated amino acid would come and bind, but here the releasing factor would come and bind here, and it causes the hydrolytic cleavage of this polypeptide chain with this transfer RNA, and now the chain of the polypeptide chain is ready. This is the termination. Now we'd go to post-translational modification. After the protein is formed, there are several post-translational modification. Now we have seen here the newly formed protein is released. Now it is not the final stage that the fully activated protein is formed. Now after the release also there is the folding processes, and after the folding processes now they have to go to the target site, because some amino acids some proteins might have to go to the mitochondria, other have to go to the lysosomes, and other have to go to some other organelles, because they are synthesized in the cytosol itself. So there are some modifications, proper foldings, and now they will be targeted to their target site. And this is all about the termination process. Now we have talked about the termination protein synthesis in the cytoplasm. However, the protein synthesis also occurs in the mitochondria, because we know that mitochondria also contains the DNA material, and which is similar to prokaryotic DNA. And that DNA, especially the mitochondrial DNA, would code for the proteins involved in the electron transport chain. And the system is similar to the prokaryotic one. Though the DNA is present in the mitochondria, all the required proteins for the mitochondria will not be coded by that mitochondrial DNA. Most of the proteins would be coded by the nuclear DNA, and that protein should be formed in the cytoplasm, and that will go to the mitochondria, or other will go to the lysosomes and everywhere. That means they are targeted later on. Now we are talking about the post-translational modification. Earlier, after transcription, we had talked about the post-transcriptional modification. That means what type of modification will be there after the formation of RNA, and we have studied in detail about the modification in messenger RNA, and that too in the eukaryotic case. And we had studied like modification of 5' capping. That 5' capping will immediately start once the formation of mRNA has started, and after that tailing would occur, and after tailing, splicing and editing would also occur. That was the post-transcriptional modification. Now we are talking about the post-translational modification. That means after the proteins are formed, they will be modified, and this is known as the post-translational modification. What sort of modification will be here? Just like proteolytic cleavage. And next one would be proteolytic cleavage. We'll see. Next one would be the covalent modification, just like the phosphorylation. You might have heard about the different enzymes. Some of the enzymes are activated in the phosphorylated condition, others are active in the dephosphorylated condition. That means phosphorylation and dephosphorylation regulate the activity of the enzyme, and that phosphorylation and dephosphorylation means that is the post-translational modification of the proteins. Next one is the hydroxylation. In certain in certain amino acids, there will be hydroxylation, and you might have heard about the protein collagen. And this protein collagen consists of lysine and proline. And in collagen, this lysine and proline are in the form of hydroxyproline and hydroxylysine. Actually, during the formation of the collagen in translation process, that means the synthesis of the protein, that in the long polypeptide chain, only proline and lysine are incorporated. But after the formation of the long polypeptide chain, only after that, OH group is added to proline, resulting in the formation of hydroxyproline, and OH group is added to lysine for the formation of hydroxylysine. But if you see the mature collagen, that means it consists of hydroxyproline and hydroxylysine. Actually, there hydroxyproline and hydroxylysine formation, addition of OH group is the post-translational modification. Next type of post-translational modification is gamma carboxylation, and this gamma carboxylation is especially important for the clotting factors. If you talk about the vitamin K dependent clotting factors, second 7, 9 and 10, I guess not all, but I think 2 out of the 4, there would be gamma carboxylation, and only after the gamma carboxylation they would be active, and that would be held by vitamin K. That's why they are the vitamin K dependent factors. Next is the glycosylation. That means some protein residue will be attached with the proteins, and this is known as the glycosylation. The best example is glycosylated hemoglobin. You might have heard. If we measure glyco-HB or HbA1c or glycosylated hemoglobin, they are similar, not the same. There is little difference, but they are similar. Glycosylated hemoglobin means in case of diabetic people, what happens is if the blood glucose concentration is high, then in the same proportion they will be attached to the hemoglobin, known as the glycated hemoglobin. That means now in the hemoglobin, that will be post-translational modification, that is the glycosylation. And this glycosylation usually happens in the serine or threonine, because they have the OH groups, and in that OH groups it is easier to glycosylate most of the times. Now next is methylation and acylation. Next one would be the subunit aggregation. You might have heard about the hemoglobin. Hemoglobin molecule, this is a tetramer. It consists of 4 subunits, 2 alpha subunits and 2 beta subunits. Actually, those alpha and beta subunits are coded by the different genes, and they are the proteins are synthesized differently. That means the subunits alpha and beta. After the formation of alpha and beta chain, now there will be subunit aggregation, resulting in the formation of the complete hemoglobin. Okay, this is under the subunit aggregation. Now next would be the protein folding. That means actually the protein are very large molecules. usually thousands of amino acids, most of the proteins, very large molecules. Why proteins are large is they also act as the enzyme, especially the enzyme proteins are very large. You might have heard about glycolysis. In the case of glycolysis, the first step would be the conversion of glucose to glucose 6 phosphate, and that will be helped by the enzyme hexokinase. How that enzyme helps, not only in the case, but in all the enzymes, how they help is they have a proper binding site at which in this case glucose and ATP would come and bind. That means in that large protein molecules, by proper folding, it has to create certain site where the glucose molecule will come and sit along with the ATP molecule, and there is the phosphorylation of it, resulting in the formation of glucose 6 phosphate by hexokinase or glucokinase. That means I am just telling that these proteins, especially the enzyme proteins, they are the very large molecules, and they have to be proper folding. However, folding is important for others also. Just to show you the vivid example of the case enzymes. Okay, now let's see the proteolytic degradation. Proteolytic degradation or trimming. Some portions of the proteins are cut to liberate the active proteins. To liberate the active proteins, you can see in the case of digestive enzymes, pepsinogen to pepsin, trypsinogen to trypsin, and also in the formation of insulin. Preproinsulin is first of all formed in the form of preproinsulin, and later on insulin is degraded. Insulin is formed by degrading short chain of the preproinsulin. This pre-pepsinogen to pepsin and trypsinogen to trypsin, these are the digestive enzymes. They are actually synthesized in the inactive form by the cells, which will produce them, because if they are already present synthesized in the active form, they would digest. That's why they are synthesized in the inactive form. This is also the example of post-translational modification. In the case of digestive enzymes, if you see the digestive enzymes which would digest the proteins as well as the enzymes which will digest the phospholipids, they are synthesized in the precursor form, that is the pre-pro form or the gen form, trypsinogen. And later, after they enter the intestinal lumen or the gastric lumen, only after that they are activated, and this activation is by the cleavage. Some amino acid chain would be released, and the active portion would be formed. This is, we are talking about the post-translational modification. Okay. Now also the covalent modification, changes after protein synthesis, which can lead to the increase or decrease in protein activity, as I have said, phosphorylation or dephosphorylation. The hydroxyl group containing amino acids especially undergo phosphorylation and dephosphorylation, and also we have taken the example of the enzymes. Some enzymes are active in the phosphorylated form, and the others are active in the dephosphorylated form. And in the in making phosphorylated and dephosphorylated, actually protein kinases add the phosphate group and do phosphorylation, whereas the protein phosphatases will will hydrolyze the phosphate group, resulting in the dephosphorylated form of the enzyme. And some enzymes are active in the phosphorylated form, whereas others are active in the dephosphorylated form. That means the covalent modification we are talking about, the phosphorylation and dephosphorylation will be the best example, and also to remember about the enzymes. Some enzymes are active in the phosphorylated form, whereas the others are active in the dephosphorylated form. Okay, this is about the post-translational modification we have studied. Now we'll go to the inhibitors of protein synthesis. Okay, we have seen the protein synthesis, and after we went through all the mechanisms of protein synthesis. Now it would be easier for us to visualize how the different antibiotics will inhibit, or how the different poisons would act. Now let's see inhibitors of protein synthesis. Tetracycline. This this tetracycline inhibits the protein synthesis by blocking the A site on the ribosome, preventing the binding of amino acid tRNA. That means this blocks the A site. We have talked about the amino acid binding site, peptide site, and the exit site in the ribosomes during protein synthesis. What this tetracycline does is this inhibits the protein synthesis by blocking the A site. If it's and this is only in the prokaryotic case, and if it inhibits the A site, means there will be no translation and protein will not be synthesized. If protein would not be synthesized, that particular prokaryotic organism, that bacteria cannot grow in our body, and eventually they will be finished. Next, chloramphenicol. This inhibits the peptidyl transferase activity. That means After the activated amino acids have come and attached to the A side and the P side, there should be the peptide linkage between the two activated amino acids, and that means this chlorine pellicle inhibits at that stage. Now, if you see the streptomycin, this streptomycin inhibit initiation complex formation, bind to 30 subunits and distort the structure of assembling initiation complex, cause misreading of the genetic code, and at relatively low concentration, and inhibits the initiation at higher concentration. This is how the streptomycin acts. This is about mm, the inhibition in the prokaryotic case. We'll also see the inhibition in the eukaryotic case. Let's see. The inhibitors of protein synthesis in the eukaryotic case, cycloheximide, this inhibits the peptidyl transferase in 60S subunit. And that diphtheria toxin prevents the translocation by inactivating the elongation factor 2 in the case of eukaryotic. These are some of the inhibitors which we included. Now, this is the end of our translation class. In the next class, we will start with the regulation of gene expression, and we'll give the focus on the operon concept. Okay. Now, if you have any questions, you can just unmute your mic and put your questions. Okay, if you want to ask any question, you can just unmute your mic. No questions at all? Okay, if no question, next time. If you have, you may also ask the next time. And in next time, we'll start with gene expression and regulation. Expression we have seen, now the regulation part will cover. Okay, this much for today. Thank you.